I do have a soft voice, I always say, so I'm sorry about that. But good evening, and it's good to see everyone here tonight. And I think I've seen some of you before, but not some others. So my name is Sister Devy, and I am a missionary sister from the Verbum Dei Community, and I've been here in London for 6 years. So Louise invited me to talk about this topic, Sister Dying. Just a disclaimer, because she mentioned that it's a part of a series of talks on sanctity of life. I'm not sure if you know about that, but I was expecting that there's already a talk on the sanctity of life, and you would start from the beginning and speak about abortion and other stuff, and then end with assisted dying, but it seems like we're going backwards. So this is the first topic. So we'll start with assisted dying instead. But hopefully we'll see where this goes. I'll start my presentation more with explaining a bit the context, and then a bit about the church teaching itself and what does the church say, and then after that we'll go into the spiritual parts of it and the questions afterwards. Because I think it is a tricky topic, it is controversial, and there's a lot of confusion in it as well. So I think it's good just to start from the same page so that we know what we're talking about. I think context-wise, it is very much a current reality. This is not something that is just from the past, or it's not a theoretical question, but it's very much a current and recent reality. I'm not sure if any of you know any of these films. Have you heard of the film Supernova? It's got Colin Firth in it, and what's that guy name? Tucci something. It's quite recent, as you can see. Blackbird, have you heard of it? No? You've heard of it? Me Before You. I think everyone knows that one, yes? That's the famous one. $1 Million Baby is a bit older. Yeah, so I think the most famous one is probably Me Before You. Has anyone not seen that one? So because I won't talk about it because then I won't give you spoilers. But these are recent films that all of them deals with either euthanasia or assisted dying or assisted suicide. No spoilers, but basically in all of them, one of the characters choose assisted dying or assisted suicides. So it is quite recent, it's a reality, and it's becoming more and more accepted in the society to talk about euthanasia or assisted dying. And I think, first of all, just to clarify the terminologies, because I've mentioned assisted dying, suicide, euthanasia, these are slightly different terms to talk about this. And I think it's good that we start just by clarifying what do we mean with each one and what's the difference. How many of you know about euthanasia, assisted dying, or suicide? Who would say that you've thought about it? Okay, or you know the background a bit? Okay, so some of you, yeah, you know a bit. So you might be familiar with this, but just the first thing, we're talking about assisted dying, which is the topic of today. So by that, we mean, this is taken from the BMJ website, which is British Medical Journal. It's prescribing a life-ending drug for terminally ill, mentally competent adults to administer themselves after meeting strict legal safeguards. Assisted dying, or defined as it is legal and regulated in the US states of California, Colorado, Hawaii, Montana, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington, and similarly in Victoria, Australia. So here we're talking when we say assisted dying, it's about we're dealing with someone who is terminally ill, someone who is already dying at the end of their life, but they are still mentally competent. So not in coma, not in vegetable state or anything like that. So someone who is dying but still lucid and still alert, and they ask to basically end their life, and the medicine is administered themselves. So they basically, quite commonly what they would do is they would be given a drug which they take, and and within 5 minutes or so they will be unconscious, and within half an hour all life will cease for the person, they will die. So again, we're talking about people who are terminally ill and who are still lucid. Now, if we're talking about assisted suicide, slightly different terminology. It also includes those who are terminally ill and dying and is lucid. But this is giving assistance to die to people with long-term progressive conditions as well, and people who are not dying, in addition to patients with terminal illness. Again, the drugs are self-administered. So some people would say assisted dying is no different from assisted suicide. So there's already a different point of view there. Assisted suicide, as defined like this, is permitted in Switzerland. So here we're talking about cases such as, for example, if someone has early onset dementia. So the person as they are is still okay, physically fine, but they have an early onset dementia which will progress quite rapidly, and perhaps within 1, 2, or 3 years the person will lose a sense of identity of who they are or things around them, their memories, and their body functions will fail as well. So a person in that condition might decide, before I lose my sense of identity, I want to end my life first and to choose assisted suicide. So they're not terminally ill yet, and we're talking about shortening someone's life, not just 1 or 2 months, but perhaps 1, 2, 3, 4 years. So that's what we're talking about here. Or we're also talking about cases of a person who perhaps is quadriplegic, or someone who is disabled, and they've chosen to end their life because they don't want to continue as they are, which is the case of me before you, as you remember from this story. Are we okay with this so far? Yeah? Okay. Now, when we're talking about euthanasia, the difference is the drugs or medicine or the thing that is administered is not taken by yourself. It's the doctor or medical practitioner who will give it to you. So that's the difference. So it would be a matter of the doctor either injecting you with something or assisting you. Say, for example, if you take the drug and then it doesn't work, they will then administer an injection to assure that you die at that point. So when we're talking about euthanasia, the difference is the medical practitioner is not just giving you a prescription for a drug that you take yourself, but the medical practitioner is administering it to you. There are 2 types. There's the voluntary, which again, the person is still lucid and they choose it. And when we talk about non-voluntary euthanasia, it's someone who is already not conscious and or someone who does not have the mental capacity to make the decision anymore. So they might be alert, but they're not lucid anymore, or they don't have they cannot discern anymore what is right or wrong for themselves, and someone else will make the decision for them. So there are these 3 terminologies. I think if we don't clarify it, it can be quite confusing sometimes, and they all sound the same, but they are quite different slightly. Another thing we're talking about is withdrawing treatment, which is again this is completely different from the other 3 that we talked about. And this is taken from the NHS website. With terminal illnesses, there may come a time when it's clear that there is no prospect of recovery and that life-sustaining treatments are prolonging the dying process. If there is an agreement that continuing treatment is not in your best interest, treatment can be withdrawn, allowing you to die peacefully. So that's different in the sense that you're not giving the person anything for them to die. It's not a drug, it's not an injection to make you die, but it's withdrawing treatment. So again, someone who is really already, for example, already has cancer, and at the last stages, the person is not conscious anymore, and all the organs are already failing, and they're depending on life support machines to keep going. And perhaps there are infections every other week, there's complications here and there, and you know that this person will never recover, will not wake up again, and there's no way to sustain this life. So in that case, withdrawing treatment is it's not considered euthanasia or assisted dying, because the person is naturally dying anyway, and you're just withdrawing treatment and allowing that person to actually die. In that moment, it's a natural death. Is that okay? It's quite clear, isn't it, once you put it that way? Okay. Now, just to understand, what is the law in England and in Wales? So in England, the first four things, assisted dying, assisted suicide, voluntary and non-voluntary euthanasia, is illegal. So, not for the person themselves. So if I administer the drug myself, or if I throw myself off the bridge, if I commit suicide in that sense, it's not an illegal thing. They can't put me in prison after that. But the person assisting it is committing a crime. So the question is not so much for the person, but the ones around them. So it is an offense to aid, abet, counsel, or procure the suicide of another. And a person who committed this offense is liable to imprisonment for a term of maximum 14 years. So the ones at risk here are the family members who are allowing the person to commit suicide or to have euthanasia, or the medical practitioner. So in England and in Wales, it's illegal. But withdrawal of treatment, it's fine. That's okay. This is the law currently in the country. Now, this has changed in the last several years, because there's more and more people who are lobbying and who are fighting to make it legal, and for it to not be illegal for someone to assist in a suicide. In 2019, for example, so this is just 3 years ago, there was an interview from BBC. This is an article in BBC about what's the difference between assisted suicide and euthanasia. BMA is British Medical Association, says that improvement in palliative care allows patients to die with dignity, but that assisted death should not be legalized in the UK in any form. The organization argues that legalization would go against the ethics of clinical practice, as the principal purpose of medicine is to improve patients' quality of life, not to foreshorten it. So just 3 years ago, in 2019, BMA had a clear position that they advise against it, because as a medical practitioner, your role is to improve life, not to end it. That's your vocation, basically, to care for those who are ill, who are sick, but it's to improve life. Now, just 2 years after that, so this is last year, they produced an article in their website where they've changed to a position of neutrality on assisted dying, including physician-assisted dying. So 2 years after that interview, on Tuesday 14, they changed their position, and now they said, we're not saying anything anymore. We're not saying that we're against or that we're for. They did a survey, they did a vote with 30,000 plus members these are people who are medical practitioners. 49% of the representatives voted for the motion, and 48% voted against. That's 1% of difference, but it was enough to change their position from against to neutrality. So this is a bit like Brexit, isn't it? When just like 1 or 2% makes all the difference. So it is a highly debatable topic, not just in the church, but in everywhere, in the secular society, in medical fields. People are talking about this and trying to discern what is the right thing to do. What is our position? What is the best thing to do for the patient? So far, the context, okay? Any questions, thoughts, anything?
Yeah, I think it's just the whole definition of the different methods of dying is more of a legal. We're just using legal terminology, but in reality, it's just the same thing. You know, with the exception of euthanasia, the others are just legal terminology to try and appease people or that sort of thing, because it's just the same thing. If somebody is terminally ill and you allow them to, you prescribe medicine for them to take end their life, or that is the assisted dying and assisted suicide, I don't see any difference in those two. I think it's the same. It's just a legal terminology for the sake of appeasing people.
I suppose that's why they did say it there, isn't it? For some people, there's no difference between assisted dying or suicide. So it is a question for debate. The NJ themselves said that these definitions are not definite. It's definitions that are not definite. It's still debatable because depending on who says them, depending on what point you're trying to make, it's convenient to use one term or another. Because to say assisted dying and to put the emphasis of this person is dying anyway, and instead of waiting for 3 months, you're just shortening it into 3 days or something. It's saying that at the end of the day, it's the same. You are ending one's life basically, but one you're talking about someone who is dying immediately, and another case is perhaps it's more clear that you're not dying now. You still have 3 years to live, perhaps, but you don't want that life. So you're right. It's very tricky, but that's what the people use in that sense.
I just noticed that change in position, I think, of the ability, and maybe because of the media coverage. So I don't remember in 2019. When they looked up an issue, even the BBC, who's supposed to try and be impartial, the way they present the issue is that being compassionate to help somebody who's already ill, to kind of reduce their suffering. So in the news, it doesn't show kind of the other side of the debate in terms of the need to support life and encourage life and even it's okay that people take kind of possibility of healing and to give that person more time with friends and family. To me, it sounds a bit like the abortion debate. We often get quite a lot on one side, but which is pro-abortion, but we don't get that other side, which is kind of challenging abortion and saying it's wrong.
You're right, actually, because in that article, what's the difference between assisted suicide and euthanasia? If you do look that up on BBC from 2019, they put up 2 videos, and both of them are very much trying to tackle that compassionate side of you, saying, okay, these are 2 people who are dying, and it's more presented towards the side of agreeing with euthanasia and assisted dying. So it could play a big part in people's decision after that, and that's what the media does in a way. As much as you try to be impartial, it's hard. So I agree with that. I think the debate has been made bigger, and all the films that we see as well, romanticizing the idea or presenting it like it's something merciful and compassionate to do. And that is precisely the tricky part, isn't it? It's when you're faced with the reality, and it does sometimes, it's not so clear anymore what's the more compassionate or loving thing to do. So I think this is precisely the tricky bit. But if we talk about the teaching of the Catholic Church, this is, again, actually it's not that much difference from the legal law in England. The Catholic Church says that all those 4 are illegal and withdrawal treatment is actually okay. It's morally unacceptable. This is from CCC, the Catechism of the Catholic Church. An act or omission which of itself or by intention causes death in order to eliminate suffering constitutes a murder gravely contrary to the dignity of the human person. and to the respect due to the living God, our Creator. So, if we're talking about the Catholic teaching, which is the topic of today's Catholic teaching on assisted dying, this is at the heart of it. If you ask me, that's the answer. The Church says it's morally unacceptable. Not just because it's wrong, therefore you can't do it, but it's in order to defend, again, the sanctity of life, and that it's contrary to the dignity of the human person and the respect due to the living God, our Creator. So, the Catechism of the Catholic Church says, with regards to withdrawal of treatment, so this is talking not about euthanasia, but about withdrawal of treatment. It's actually quite beautiful because it says, discontinuing medical procedures that are burdensome, dangerous, extraordinary, or disproportionate to the expected outcome can be legitimate. So they have nothing against that. It is a refusal of overzealous treatment. Here, one does not will to cause death. One's inability to impede it is merely accepted. So when we're withdrawing treatment, the Church is saying, well, that's fine. The person is dying anyway. We need to preserve them as much as we can. But there comes a point where it's not reasonable anymore and it's disproportionate to do so. And it's not anything against the Church law, Church teaching or anything. But it is necessary to state, this is from the Sacred Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, Declaration of Euthanasia. It's necessary to state firmly once more that nothing and no one can in any way permit the killing of an innocent human being, which is what is at the heart of assisted dying, suicide, or euthanasia. Whether we're talking about a fetus or an embryo, an infant or an adult, an old person, or one suffering from an incurable disease, or a person who is dying. Furthermore, no one is permitted to ask for this act of killing, either for himself or herself, or for another person entrusted to his or her care, nor can he or she consent to it, either explicitly or implicitly, nor can any authority legitimately recommend or permit such an action. So, the Catholic teaching is clear on that. This declaration on euthanasia comes out in 1980. So, the Catechism of the Catholic Church draws on this document to speak about euthanasia. And it speaks about euthanasia as an act of killing. And that's very strong because even though you're taking your own life in a way, but the medical practitioner who's prescribed the drugs to you is assisting in that ending of one's life. So it's very clear in that in a church position, it's an act of killing. And the same congregation recognized that it may happen that by reason of prolonged and barely tolerable pain, for deeply personal or other reasons, people may be led to believe that they can legitimately ask for death or obtain it for others. So they recognize this is a reality. But although in these cases the guilt of the individual may be reduced or completely absent, the person might say, my conscience is clear, I feel no guilt whatsoever in this. Nevertheless, the error of judgment into which the conscience falls, perhaps in good faith even, does not change the nature of this act of killing, which will always be in itself something to be rejected. So, again, very clear, isn't it, like what the church document says. It's basically they're recognizing that it's true that in these situations, in many of these cases, it's not a decision taken lightly. We're dealing with people who are in pain, who are suffering, who are struggling with different realities of life. Such as it might seem that in good faith it's the most loving, merciful thing to do. But it doesn't take away that you are taking away someone's life. And it is an act of killing still. In the church point of view and position, it is still considered murder in a way. So that's clear, but I think for many people it is a strong statement, and not everyone can accept that or understand that as it is. Personally, I would say, as much as that would be difficult to apply in certain realities or situations, concrete situations, I think the church is right in saying that, and in order to be coherent with its own philosophy and belief, there is no way the church can say anything other than this. The church, as from always, have believed that life is sacred. There is that sanctity in life. The church always believed that life is a gift from God. Our life is in God's hands, and as such, I don't think the church will ever change from this position, even if legally the situation changed. It's the same as a couple of months ago, I had a discussion with some confirmation candidates, and we were talking about abortion. Similar situation, what the church says and the realities and all the individual cases. And they kept on asking me, all the teenagers kept on asking me, do you think it will ever change? Do you think the church will ever say something different, maybe in 50 years, maybe in 100 years? Because it's true the church has changed sometimes, not very often. And I have to say to them truthfully, I don't think the church will ever say that abortion is okay. Because if it ever says that it's okay, it's going against its own principle on what it understands life to be. In the same way, with this, as much as we can be compassionate and we can understand pastorally the individual cases, I don't think the church can ever say in an official document that euthanasia, assisted suicide, or assisted dying is okay and acceptable and it's recommendable. So I think this is what I understand so far from the position of the church. Now, if we look a bit, not just on the legal or moral side of it and a bit of spiritual part, because I suppose, this is a side note, but I just found it interesting that I checked the Code of Canon Law on euthanasia, and I couldn't find anything on it. So it's not in the canon law. So in case you're wondering about it, there's enough written about it in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, but the Code of Canon Law actually doesn't say anything specifically or clearly about euthanasia. I just thought I'd mention that. So. But spiritual perspective, I'm sure you've heard of Francis of Assisi and the Canticle of Creation, and he is one of the saints from how many years ago? 800, 900 years ago. He said, "Be praised, my Lord, for those who bear sickness and weakness in peace and patience. You will grant them a crown. Be praised, my Lord, for our sister death, whom we must all face." Again, from Isaiah chapter 40, it says, "Grass withers, the flower fades, when the breath of the Lord blows upon it. Surely people are grass." Speaking about the shortness of our life and how quickly and how fragile it is that it comes and goes. The psalm speaks about how God, when you hide your face, they, the creation, are dismayed. If you take away their spirit, they expire and return to their dust. The same concept. Life is a gift from God. Sorry, that's a repeat. Ignore that one. From the book of Job, "The Spirit of God has made me, and the breath of the Almighty gives me life." All of these readings say the same thing. Our life is a gift from God, and it's God who sustains it, and it's Him who holds it all the time. The same Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith says, life is a gift of God. And then it follows straight away with a beautiful line. On the other hand, death is unavoidable. We all agree with that. It is necessary, therefore, that we, without in any way hastening the hour of death, should be able to accept it with full responsibility and dignity. It is true that death marks the end of our earthly existence, but at the same time it opens the door to immortal life. Therefore, all must prepare themselves for this event in the light of human values, and Christians even more so in the light of faith. We all agree that we all will die one day. We can't escape that. That's the reality. That's the one certain and sure thing in our life, that we will die. Do we accept this or do we not accept this? And how do we live with it? It's true it's not easy to accept death, but it's not only just the fact of accepting death itself, but what comes with death. Because perhaps we accept death, oh that's fine, I can die tomorrow, I can walk on the street and be hit by a bus and I'll die, I'm at peace with that, that's okay. Maybe we accept that. But what comes with death, do we accept that as well? The document continues, nevertheless, the fact remains that death is often preceded or accompanied by severe and prolonged suffering. And that is something which naturally causes people anguish. Physical suffering is certainly an unavoidable element of the human condition. On the biological level, pain or suffering actually it's a warning. And it's actually useful because if you touch a hot stove and you don't realize that it's hot and it's painful, you can burn yourself without realizing it. So pain, biologically, it's a good thing. It's telling you that there's something wrong that you have to fix. But its effects since it affects the human psychological makeup, it often exceeds its own biological usefulness, and so can become so severe as to cause the desire to remove it at any cost. We don't like pain. In general, we don't like pain. We don't like suffering, and we don't like agony. That's our reality. So, if we have the choice to remove it, our natural instinct is to do so, because who would want to suffer voluntarily? And so I think, in terms of our spiritual growth and journey, it is a call to accept our limitation, to accept pain, to accept suffering and agony, and to learn how to live with this. Because not just death is it's a natural end of our life, but pain, suffering and agony is part of life as well. How much do we spend in our life avoiding it? And how much do we spend learning to embrace and accept it as part of life? And I think that's a challenge for all of us spiritually. If we're talking no more about moral, but spiritually, in our own personal journey and growth. How is God calling me to accept these limitations of humanity? And in the next few slides, I'm going to put out, these are excerpts from an association called Dignity in Dying. Have you heard of it? Yeah? There is a campaign for dignity in dying, and this is a group of people who are fighting to change the law and to legalize assisted suicide. And so the next few slides, they're snippets. I've copy and paste them from the website. I want to invite you to find there is one common word in each one of the slides. Yeah? So let's see if we can find, this is not spot the difference, but spot the common word. Assisted dying, this is what the website says, allows the dying person the choice to control their death if they decide their suffering is unbearable. And they make a point, it is illegal in the UK. Yeah? Next thing. We believe the right law for the UK is one that allows dying people with 6 months or less to live the option to control their death. We do not support a wider law. Dying people are not suicidal. They don't want to die, but they do not have the choice to live. When death is inevitable, suffering should not be. Along with good care, dying people deserve the choice to control the timing and manner of their death. Another one. Dying people are already ending their lives to avoid painful and undignified deaths. Many pay thousands of pounds to travel abroad to guarantee a safe and peaceful death. They do so to access a proven and safe way to control their death with medical supervision. Many cannot travel, so risk a painful and gruesome death by ending their lives at home. Many more are suffering and dying without dignity because they have no choice. We believe dying people should have the means to control their death safely and comfortably at home. So this is all what the website say about it.
Well, there are two words which jump out to me: choice and control. And it's more or less
Very clear.
they're intertwined. So it talks about the choice, control, and both of them, although not in the same sentence, they're in the same paragraph, and you can infer what they're trying to say by the slides. Sorry for giving the answer away.
You just save everyone else the work. But it's true. It's that word control that I was looking for. As a country, this is again a more compassionate country, and NHS. This is their pitch. As a country, we have a long and proud history of providing free and compassionate healthcare. Forcing people to travel abroad and pay thousands of pounds for a dignified death is cruel and wrong. Dying people deserve high-quality end-of-life care, and the choice of assisted dying get the choice. And this is just like Q&A from the website. Should dying people be free to choose when and how they die? Seeking control, and this is very interesting to know what they say. Seeking control is a natural instinct throughout life. It is wrong to say that we should abandon this urge in our final weeks and months. The current law tells dying people that if they want to control their deaths, they must travel abroad or do so behind closed doors. And the last one, this is someone, the patron of Dignity in Dying. We have no control over how we arrive in the world. But at the end of life, we should have control over how we leave it. It's very interesting how they present their argument. I think there is something that is very much existential in all these arguments that they say. It is true. Taking control is instinctive for us. I think all of us, from when we were little, we spent all our life trying to take control of our life. Isn't that true? From little, that's what we learn. You need to choose. You have choices. What do you want to be when you grow up? What color do you like? What do you want to eat? Yeah? And what studies, what you study or don't study. And we are taught, especially in first world countries, our mentality from young is that you need to take control of your life. It's a bad thing if you're not in control of your life. And so you need to take control of your financial situation. You need to control your studies, where you go to uni. You need to control your career. You need to choose your career. You need to control if you get married or not get married. You need to control if you have children or not, how many children you have, what they do afterwards, where they study. All our life, we are trained to take control and to control as many aspects of our life as possible. And the reality is we are hardly ever in control of our life. Even, just think of today. Yeah? Think of your day today, the last, not even 24 hours, 18 hours, 12 hours. When you woke up, what did you plan to do for today? And how many things didn't really go the way that they did? Yeah? I woke up this morning, I thought, okay, 10:30, I'm supposed to meet a lady and have tea and coffee with her. Half an hour before she called me and said, I'm sorry, my daughter has COVID, so we can't meet up. And okay, there you go, that's a whole change of plan. How many people travel today wanting to do something and it's just not in your control, you can't. Just in the last 24 hours, how many things are not in your control? If we think about it. And in a bigger picture of your life now, how many things are not in our control? Your dreams when you were younger, or when you were in university, and what you're living now. How many of it really is in your control? And for the rest of your life? And I think this is the very high ideal and challenge that our church, our Lord presents to us. But at the same time, It's not a high ideal to be morally perfect or good. It's not that. It's an invitation to go deeper and accept, to make peace with a very existential reality of our life. We are not in control of it. We are poor, we are helpless. At any moment we can die, we can go, we can lose all our capacities. And this is what is hard, especially if a person doesn't have faith. Even for a person with faith, it is hard. Even for all of us here, I'm sure it's not something easy to accept that I'm not in control or that I can let go of control. And all of these phrases that they're talking about, it's going the opposite to what our faith is asking. I'm not saying it's right or wrong or good or bad. I'm just saying that this is what they're doing and that it's very actually instinctive. But it's the opposite to what we are invited to do in our faith. The choice to control their death if they decide their suffering is unbearable. I'm going to pick these phrases now and just present the other side of it. And who decides if a suffering is unbearable or not? And how many people in the world live in unbearable suffering and they cannot control or they cannot choose to run away from it? How many of us have unbearable suffering even now in our life? And it's not the answer just to run away or to shut it out. No? It's a matter of growing stronger and learning how to live with this suffering and allowing God to be the one who gives us the strength and the hope and the reason to continue. Again, the option to control their death. And it's said, where is it? Third line from the bottom. When death is inevitable, suffering should not be. There's something really wrong with that sentence because suffering is inevitable. They're saying that suffering shouldn't be inevitable. That is, but all of us have suffered in life. And suffering is very much a part of life, whether it's physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual. Suffering is part of our reality, unfortunately or fortunately. Yeah? And to choose to say that suffering should not be part of life is in a way going against nature. It's going against our instinct as well. And dying people deserve the choice to control the timing and manner of their death. Why? Just an open question. Why do they deserve this choice? Do any of us deserve the choice to control the timing and manner of our death? I don't think there's anything that says we deserve it. We don't have it, we don't choose it, and there's nothing that says that we deserve the choice to have the timing, to control the timing and manner of our death. The Savior, it's more or less. Dying people deserve high quality end-of-life care and the choice of assisted dying. And this is where it's interesting because deserve high quality end-of-life care. It's something that is already offered here, I suppose in England. There is possibility of palliative care and all that. So that's already an option that in many countries is not available, but here there is. So having given that option of palliative care, why is it still such a need to have assisted dying as well? If it's a matter of not suffering, we have the medical possibilities nowadays to actually save people from pain. Many of the people who are dying, they have the choice to either receive morphine or other things to alleviate their pain. It's true, it's going to take away their lucidity and they will be semi-conscious, but it's not as if there is no option to remove the pain. So people can choose. If they can't stand the pain, there are options to lighten the pain, to make it less. Why does suicide or dying have to be the only option or the option for these people? So All of this is an invitation to let go of control. And I think this is I feel the invitation for us personally to grow in our own personal life. And on the other hand, it's also a pastoral challenge. It's not just us, but it's quite often many other people. No? There's two aspects of it. We can think for ourselves right now. If you imagine yourself in a position where, say, you're all quite young here, so we're not thinking about dying yet, but imagine if you're 90 years old. If you reach that age, you're 90 years old, and then you're sick and dying. You have cancer, and the cancer is so painful, and you are there, and you know that you have no more than 2 months. You don't, and someone offered you, would you like to take this pill? That will just mean you just go to sleep and you die peacefully, rather than going through 2 months of really extreme pain. You're not conscious anymore anyway, because if you want to take the morphine, you're not going to be conscious anymore. And your family is going to go through all of this with you for the next 2 months. Some of us might say, yes, no, that's fine, I'll still go through that. But the temptation or the pull to just say, what difference does it make if I live two months less or more? Why not? There are many cases if you put yourself in it, or someone that you care about, that you love, if they're in that position. Especially if the person does not have the faith or the capacity to accept pain and suffering. And they said, I want this. This is challenging. How do you say to this person, you can't, you shouldn't, it's against church teaching. And that person is there in agony, in pain, and they're just saying, I just can't handle this anymore, and I just want to end it. And you yourself are suffering because that person is in so much pain. How do you approach that situation? What do you say to that person? So I think this is where it is quite a sensitive topic, because I imagine the people who are fighting for the dignity in dying, perhaps many of them know people who are in that situation, or they themselves were in it. So I think it's sometimes easy for us to judge from a higher moral ground and to say, the church says no, these people are all leading people astray and committing sins and everything like that. But I think it's more complex than that. And when you're talking about real people in front of you that you care about, or even yourself going through it, it's not a clear-cut black and white situation. So I think this is where pastorally it's also a challenge. How do we apply this understanding in our lives, but around ourselves? I think I'll stop there. I don't know if there's another bit. I was thinking maybe, I don't know how much time we have.
Maybe we should start wrapping up.
Yeah, I've finished with the presentation, so I don't know if we have time for question discussion or we need to be finished already.
Maybe we should finish.
Yes, I can say. Well, I'll leave it at that then. Things for you to think about. I suppose afterwards, if there are questions or that you want to ask, I imagine at the end of the sessions we can just have questions and thoughts. But I'm sorry if I talk too much.
Thank you, and thank you for the explanations and also the idea of letting go of control. I know that I'm not very good at letting go of control, but my job is teaching me that I have no control over the kids I work with. And so here's just a little thank you from the community.